episode of Fix It in Post, the show where we make effects that people shouldn't see. And today I'm going to do another effect from my movie, The Hammer, which is available everywhere now. You guys should check it out, and let's look at what we have.
Why is your brother such a retard?
Now, this is Matt Hamill when he's younger, and he had just gotten in a fight, and his brother over here just kicked this kid in the nuts. Came and stood up for him. And one thing that happens when you work with kids a lot is sometimes they have a tendency to smile, as you can see over here. And they just keep cracking themselves up. Now in this scene, it was important for me that this kid did not look like he's happy, that he's angry and he's protecting his brother. And this was the only shot that we had. So for today's visual effect, I'm going to try to hide his smile so that maybe the scene looks like it has a little bit more gravity and is not kind of as weak of a punch. So I already have my clip set up here in a new composition, and I've marked my in and out points. So I'm going to right click on the work area bar, choose trim comp to work area, and here is my work area. So I think my strategy for this is going to be pretty easy, which is I'm going to try to find a spot where his face is not smiling, where he looks kind of angry. Maybe somewhere around there, one of these frames. See, right here he's smiling. Right here he's not smiling. Looks kind of angry and mean. So I think if I take a frame from here, wherever he looks the meanest, perhaps here, and I try to copy it and paste it over the rest of the video, that might work. So let's grab this frame, and the easiest way that I have to do that is I'm going to hit Apple D when I have my layer selected. It's going to make a copy of this layer. Let's name these footage, name this face, and now I'm going to right click on this layer, and under the time option I'm going to choose freeze frame. So what this does is it just freezes that one frame that we have, and that is it for now. Oh, you know, one other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my pan behind tool. I hit Y on the keyboard to get it. I'm going to move this anchor point center to be over here around his face, and what that does is it makes sure that when we rotate, when we scale, when we do everything, it's going to be around this point instead of around this arbitrary center of the frame. So I'm going to turn off his face for now, and my next job is I need to track his face so that I can paste the frowning face on top of it. So I'm going to use my favorite 2D tracking program, Mocha. So I'm going to start by finding this clip on my computer, and it is over here, and I'm going to drop it into Mocha AE. In Mocha AE, with the new project window, we have our clip loaded up here in the import clip section. We have the pixel aspect ratio is incorrect. It should be 1, which means we're using square pixels. And other than that, I like what I see, so I'm going to click OK. So now I need to find my first frame. I'm going to go back to After Effects and try to match it up just by sight. Since this clip is actually a color corrected clip, my time code is gone, and I need to find which frame from this clip matches up with this clip in Mocha. Luckily, Matt is moving behind him, and I think that that is the exact same frame. So now that I have that, I'm going to set the endpoint over here by clicking on the Set Endpoint button. I'm going to move forward until this character, whose name is Pat in the movie, is out of the frame. I'm working here with a pretty high-res file. It's a ProRes 4444 codec, which kind of slows things down a little bit. So I marked my in and out points. I'm going to click on this button to zoom into the timeline. Now I'm going to try to find a good shot of his face. This looks pretty good. I'm going to try to draw a pretty good sized mask around him, around his face, and I'm going to hit track backwards. Okay, so we have that track, which looks pretty good. Now I'm going to track forwards. By the way, I left all the settings here at their default setting. And that looks like it tracked pretty well as well. So we have our track. Now I'm going to use the Mocha import plugin. So to do that, I need to click on this S icon over here to draw a surface. Now this surface is going to define what part of the image we're going to be working on in After Effects. So it's always good to make it a little extra wide. And let's see. So now I'm going to scroll through and make sure that it remains on the outside of his face for every frame, just so we have some buffer room to work with. And that looks good. So let's hit export tracking data. I'm going to choose After Effects corner pin, and you can see it says this supports the Mocha import plugin at the top. I'm going to save. I'm going to call this Performance Fix Corner Pin. Okay, so now we're back in After Effects, and I'm going to use this plugin called Mocha Import, which is actually a free plugin from aescripts.com. Just go there and type in Mocha Import, and I'll put a link at the bottom. Okay, so now we have the Mocha Import plugin loaded. I'm going to click on the Load Tracking Data button, and this is going to bring up the text file I just saved. Open that. Mocha Import is going to do some processing on it. It's going to ask me which frame to start the data at. I'm going to hit frame 0. And it's going to ask me what I want to do with that tracking data. I'm going to use RG Warp Create Undistorted and Stabilized Precomp. If you don't have the Red Giant Warp plugin, you can use this one, the CC Power Pin plugin. It does basically the same thing. Now I'm going to click on our footage layer down here and duplicate it. And I'm going to rename it Face Fix. And with this layer selected, I'm going to hit the Apply button. And what this does is it's going to create a new pre-comp, you can see here, that has stabilized this face. So if we look here, I can actually zoom out a little bit. We can see this character's face is right here, stabilized. So with the stabilized face, sometimes if you draw a more square-shaped surface in Mocha, when you come into After Effects, it looks kind of really distorted in a weird way. So there's an adjustment layer over here called POV control that Mocha Import automatically generates. And if we look at the parameters of what it does for us, is it actually lets us resize our section over here a little bit. And that just makes it helpful because it's easier to see what's going on. We can hide that adjustment layer. So by playing around with the adjustment layer shrink X and shrink Y parameters, we can set up a much easier shot to look at for us. So now that we have that shot, all we got to do is bring our face and stick it on there. So I'm actually going to go back into our other composition. I'm going to hit Apple X and cut the face out of there, hit Apple V to paste it in here. And now I'm going to hit the T key to lower the opacity, and it will let me see through it as I try to position it in exactly the right location. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking the one shot of Pat where I feel like he is angry, and I am going to superimpose it over the smiling version of the same character. Let's bring this to half resolution. So let's see, this is off and on. Now we really only want his face part to show through because we need the rest of the video to be what it already is. So I'm going to draw a mask just around his face, right here. Very carefully drawn mask. And if we click away, we see we now kind of have his face on top of his other face. I'm going to use the arrow keys to adjust it slightly. And actually, I'm going to draw another mask that is going to be a subtraction mask. I'm going to hit M, change the second mask to subtract, and I'm going to feather out this mask a lot. Now the reason I drew a new mask to feather out instead of just feathering out the original mask is because I want there to be much more of a feather on this border where we're blending the face with his skin than on this border where it's going to be blending with a lot of other elements. So we'll add maybe like a 10 pixel feather to this side of the mask, but maybe even less, maybe 5 pixels. And let's zoom in and really try to make this quite tight. Let's go back to our original composition. That looks very weird. Almost like a horror film weird. So this pre-composition doesn't really work. Let's see when we actually have to bring in the new face. Because before he smiles, we don't really need to see it. So I'm lowering the transparency on this top layer. This still looks good. So I'm gonna only fade in the new mad face somewhere around here. And that is just not looking good. Let's see what happens if we move it. Well, now we get to the next part where we need to start distorting the face to match the movements. And I'm going to use the liquify filter. So I'm going to click on the face, I add the liquify filter, and I'm going to hit the stopwatch next to distortion mesh. What this allows me to do, allows me to distort our still frame to try and match the frame that's underneath it. So I'm just going to go frame by frame. I'm going to keep distorting this so that it matches what's going on underneath it. By adding these little distortions, it looks like I'm also going to need to move it a little bit. So I'm going to hit the P button, hit a position keyframe over where it's looking good. I'm going to hit Shift S to also add a scale keyframe. So it looks like I'm going to have to come over here and stretch his face a little bit to keep going. So here it's just a little process of going through this shot and just really trying to make his face fit what's going on underneath it. And we'll stretch it a little bit more. Move it a little bit more. And we have it. Angry face on the kid. Let's see what happens when we play this through. Okay, so here's the shot. Is it working for us? Looks a little weird. His nose is getting very pointy. I think we can probably fade it off around the end over here when his face disappears. And I just hit the T key to set the opacity down. But there's something strange. Perhaps we need to feather the outer pixels a little more. Let's set it to 12. It does look a little bit better. I also have the problem that his eyebrows are starting to look very distorted as a result of our liquify tool. So I'm going to change it to 25%. Now, what changing the distortion percentage does is it changes how extreme your distortion is for every frame that you've done it on. So here we go. Now we're starting to look more normal. So one more thing we can do to sell this effect a little bit more is to add a blur to Pat's face as he's moving around. Let's see. I'll just rearrange that a little bit. Now the blur will sell as a motion blur, even though it's really just a fake blur that we're doing. We're going to set a keyframe. We'll set it to 4, kind of right when he starts moving. We'll set it maybe to 5 at the maximum movement area, and then we'll set it back down to 0. So what we've done here with this blurriness, oh, and we actually need to set it to 0 up at the beginning, as we blur his face more as he's moving faster. Let's see how that translates over back in our main composition. It seems to work. You got to remember that when people are going to watch the movie, they're going to be looking mostly at the kid that's getting pushed. And that's the idea behind a visual effect like this, is that it's not that we want people to think that the kid with the blue hoodie on the left is so angry. We just don't want them to be distracted by his smile. So although if we investigate this shot frame by frame, we might say, whoa, that looks really weird and crazy. What we're really seeing here is this little kid getting pushed, and we're just not being distracted by the smile. So believe it or not, a lot of times in movies, people change performances, change facial expressions with visual effects. Now in a shot like this, one more trick we could do, just in case we're worried, is we can do a power window which lets us selectively brighten or color correct a part of the image. And so I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I want to darken Pat so we're not looking at him, and I want to brighten this kid whose character's name is Martin. So on this adjustment layer, I'm going to put a curves adjustment. I'm going to pull it down a little bit, and I'm going to draw an oval and maybe rotate it a little bit around Martin, and I'm going to set it to subtract. Then I'm going to hit the F key so I can feather it out a lot. Maybe 400 pixels. And I'm actually going to twirl down the mask expansion. I'm going to expand it out. I just really don't want it to be obvious that I've done anything here. I'm going to hit M one more time to set a keyframe for the mask path. Then I'm going to fade off this power window. So I'm going to set a keyframe for 100, set a keyframe for 0, and here we have it fade from 0 to 100. So by the time we get to seeing Martin, he's bright, And then the mask moves with him. And at the end of the shot, it's still on him somehow. So we'll look at a few frames in between. Just kind of going to do a very loose roto job here. And now let's play this shot back at full speed and see if we notice that power window. We don't, I don't think, and it's very subtle, so what that lets us do is really, I think our eye's attention gets pulled over here. Here's without it, and here's with it on. You don't notice it. So that's it. Another trick we could have done is maybe a small reframe to hide his face even more, but I think it's working. So here we go. We have fixed this smiling kid and made him frown. And this is just another great example of crazy things that people do with visual effects to fix shots or movies that don't quite work right. So that is it. Thanks again for checking out the show. Let me know if you like this tutorial, if you are interested in other tutorials like this, or if I'm going too fast or too slow. This is my first set of tutorials, so I'm really curious to know what people think. Don't forget to check out the hammer. It's got this scene in it, a bunch of other scenes, and thanks a lot.